April 29th, 1943. Midnight on the North Atlantic, and the sea feels like iron. Spray lashes the bridge windows. The convoy's lights are blacked out. 30 and more dark shapes rolling in the troughs, their wakes combed flat by a gale that hasn't slept in days. On the port wing, a lookout swears he saw a white line cross the swells. Not foam, not this high up. A torpedo wake, then nothing but the hiss of water and the engine's low shudder as the ship claws uphill. On the radar, a smear blooms, disappears, blooms again. Bearings are shouted, engines throttle up. A bell rings. Somewhere astern, a whistle shrieks 3 short blasts. The ocean is awake and hunting. This is convoy ONS 5, outbound and slow, pushing west from the British Isles toward North America. 40-odd merchantmen strung in columns, a chain of steel and cargo that keeps cities lit and front lines fighting. Around them, the Mid-Ocean Escort Forces B-7 group works the gray water, the destroyers HMS Alpha and HMS Oribe, the hard-bitten sloop HMS Tay, the corvettes HMS Sunflower, HMS Snowflake, HMS Loosestrife, and HMS Vedette, small ships with big tempers, men who've learned to hear the ocean think. Captain Peter Gretton has the escort. Convoy Commodore J.K. Brook rides herd among the freighters, turning this unruly armada into one moving body. Somewhere ahead, beyond the wind's roar, Admiral Karl Donitz has written the night. Lines of U-boats strung across the convoy's path like tripwires. They will test the blackness, run on the surface with diesels rattling and bows throwing spray, diving only when the ping of Allied ASDIC reaches for them. They have done this for years. It has worked for years. But the convoy does not move blind. Flash messages crackle over the set. Bearings plots from HFDF are penciled on skin-thin chart paper, little X's that become a pattern. A centimetric set stabs through rain and fog. A green trace jumps when metal cuts water. In the combat information corner, a petty officer murmurs a contact report and rubs fatigue from his eyes. The mid-ocean air gap, the long stretch where no airplane can reach, is still out here like a hole in the sky, but it's shrinking. If the convoy can live through the next days, long-range patrols will find them. So, here is the question, shouted into the wind and never quite answered until the week is done. How, in just 1 week, do the hunters become the hunted? The first blow misses and still shakes every man on deck. A torpedo passes wide, its wake slashing the stern quarter of a freighter that never sees it. An escort siren rises and falls. HMS Vedette charges into the dark, bows knifing, her bridge crew tight-lipped and steady as they ride through a wall of spray. On the convoy's edge, HMS Snowflake catches a pulse, not a blip, a feeling, and turns hard to comb a suspected periscope's path. The sea lifts, drops, lifts again. The gale drags the convoy sideways, and Commodore Brook signals a minor alteration to keep the columns tight, as fatigue gnaws at judgment and the horizon narrows to the next wave. Donitz's wolf packs are ahead. Fewer of them than in March, more. The numbers slide, but the tactic is the same. Shadow by day, strike by night. Ride the surface like a pack of gray sharks and overwhelm the escorts. The U-boat captains trust darkness, trust discipline, trust the mathematics of desperation. The Allied skippers trust something else, a tangle of new tools and a fresh doctrine that says chase back, hit first, and never let go. And over all of it hangs the sky's silence, the air gap that makes men count hours like years. If you want to follow this week all the way, through fog, fire, and the hard turn that breaks a campaign, subscribe to What If Wars, then hold fast. A radar echo blooms again, this time steadier. In the fog, HMS Oribe rips forward, bow wave hissing as the helmsman leans into his wheel. The convoy shifts formation, columns tightening as signal lamps wink through spray. B-7 splits, 2 escorts fanning out to chase a contact. Bearings are shouted again, starboard bow, closing, shallow. And somewhere in that gray void, a second unseen periscope lines up. The men at the center of this web are tired and stubborn in equal measure. Commodore J.K. Brook, Royal Naval Reserve, rides in a merchantman, feeling the hull tremble as it fights the head seas, measuring distance not in miles, but in how long it takes to pass a signal down a line of ships. He knows that every knot lost to weather is another hour for the wolves to gather. Captain Peter Gretton, lean and relentless, has the escort team. B7 is not a wall so much as a set of quick hands. HMS Vidette with a nose for contacts and a captain who trusts his operators. HMS Sunflower, a flower-class corvette that hits above its weight and turns on a dime. HMS Tay, the sloop whose crews are as hardwired to their ASDIC sets as to sleep. HMS Snowflake and HMS Loosestrife, corvettes as dependable as anvils. HMS Offa and HMS Oribe, destroyers that can sprint, slice, and ram if the moment demands it. They know one another's engine notes, can read each other's wakes, and have learned the temperament of a sea that forgives nothing. Against them are the U-boats, sleek, cramped machines whose crews move in perpetual twilight. Donuts's doctrine is simple and savage. Spread the boats in a patrol line across the convoy's expected track, wait for a shadower to raise the alarm, then converge. Attack at night, on the surface where you are fastest and can slip through the escort screen like a fox through hedges. If forced under, use the thermals, slide beneath wakes, and let the pursuers exhaust their patterns and their nerves. It is a form of arithmetic, more attacks than the escorts can answer, more torpedoes than holes can dodge. But arithmetic changes when the numbers aren't what they seem. The escorts have HFDF now, Huff Duff, boxes that snatch a U-boat's quick burst of radio and point a finger across the compass. It's not magic, it's bearings. One bearing is a hint, 2 make a cross, 3 make a trap, traffic analysis, who's talking, how often, to whom, sketches a line of submarines as clearly as a pencil on a chart. Add centimetric radar that sees periscopes and conning towers peeking through fog, and the night begins to belong to the surface ships again. Add long-range air, still too far for comfort this week, but creeping closer, and the U-boat's safest hour shortens. Doctrine shifts with technology. Escorts no longer hover, they drive out. A contact is a command: charge, illuminate, mark, and attack. Hedgehog, the forward-throwing mortar, arcs bombs into the ocean ahead, listening for the hard thud of contact instead of hoping for the blind blossom of a depth charge. Support groups can be vectored, not just by theory, but by bearings that accumulate like a tide line. Barometer down. Visibility crossing between fog and rain. The convoy's speed sinks, rises, sinks again. Commodore Brook orders minor course changes to thread the ship pack away from the worst of the sea. The escorts fan, close, fan. On a plotting table, a petty officer draws thin pencil lines from reported positions of unseen voices. A crossfix builds. There, a patrol line forming like a bruise across the convoy's track. The kill zone isn't a place on the map so much as a threshold. Once the convoy crosses into the U-boat's net, shadowers can leapfrog their reports, lead their brothers down the convoy's flank, and take turns bleeding it. You can feel it coming: fatigue on the bridge, coffee burned to mud, that special quiet in the mess where men finish sentences in their heads because they're saving words for when it counts. A blip holds steady long enough to matter. Tay comes right, Sunflower slides to port to cover the holes she leaves, and Offa shoulders the outside edge. Snowflake's ASDIC sings, warbling, clean, then loses the note in aerated water. The helmsman swears softly, corrects, tries again. Somewhere ahead, a U-boat captain tells his helmsman to keep the bow on the convoy's beam and hold. He will try it the way he has always tried it: a surface approach at night, a sprint in the troughs, 2 torpedoes loosed in a fan, and a dive the instant the first escort turns toward him. The pressure falls another notch. The smell on deck is diesel, oilskin, and the cold copper of blood where a man bit his lip, setting a depth charge fuse. The convoy edges on, into weather that hides friends as well as enemies, into a lattice of radio ghosts that is slowly, patiently being made solid. By the end of April 29 and into April 30th, the convoy is a smudge on a chart and a long bruise on the ocean. The first shadowers take their posts. Out on the edges where the escort screen thins, HMS Vidette lunges at a radar contact that flickers, vanishes, then shows again 2 points left of the bow. She doesn't wait to be sure. She charges. A searchlight carves a pale corridor, removes it, keeps the target guessing. A U-boat captain, crouched at the surface with binoculars frosting, orders a crash dive and feels the first depth charges tumble past his hull before the boat is fully under. The sea booms, the hull drums. Something rattles off a rack. He thinks he got away. He did this time. The convoy tightens its columns and holds on. May 1st through May 3rd turns cat and mouse. HFDF bearings arrive like tapping fingers on the chart table. Here, here, and here. Enough to bend the convoy away from one trap and toward another that no one can yet see. Merchantmen take green water over bows and list back upright like they meant to. Snowflake takes a contact, loses it, regains it, marks with a smoke float, and drops a pattern that hammers the deep with a kind of hope you learn only by missing. Somewhere in that blind blue, a U-boat rides beneath a thermal with pumps cycling, still, quiet, hoping the pattern moves 3 cables off. On the 2nd of May, a freighter catches a torpedo at the end of a long, patient stalk. No time to count seconds. There is the lift, the flash, the crack like the world splitting, and then there is fire. The cargo hisses, boils, and burns. The ship leans into the wound. Men on deck run the drill they pray to never run. Lifeboats, lines, a quick prayer. We said we'd save for after, but say now. Lucistrife shoulders in through heat that peels paint and takes survivors into a world that smells like steam and cordite and wet wool. The rescued shake and do not stop. You learn a man's age by how he looks when he realizes he is still alive. That night, Tay rides her sonar tone into a run that starts as a guess and becomes a conviction. The helmsman feels the set through the wheel, a trembling that's not the sea, and compresses the turn until the instrument needles hate him. Hedgehog sings forward. The crew binds themselves to the seconds between launch and verdict. Nothing, no thud. A near miss or a clean miss. No one wastes words adjudicating. Tay goes again and again until the noise of the ship has crowded out the conversation in every head. May 4 dawns in a fog so thick you'd think the war is over, and the ocean has decided to hide the bodies. It doesn't last. The weather opens just enough to let centimetric radar and ASDIC pair off like partners at a dance. Sunflower takes a contact at close range, hard and fast, a conning tower popping out of a wave like a seal before it vanishes. She drops a pattern long and shallow, staggered to pick up a boat trying to skate under the edge. The sea heaves. The crew counts. 1, 2, 3. A muffled detonation that's different. Not the boom of a charge, but the brittle crack of something hard breaking under pressure. The operator swallows. Hold your breath. The water brings up a froth with a perfume of oil. It might be a hit. It might be a tease. In the wheelhouse, the captain does not smile. There is a moment on the afternoon watch when hours pass with nothing but wind, and the strain shows on faces. You want motion. You want action. Silence can be a kind of torture when the hour before and the hour after might explode. Then, as gray turns to something darker, bearings align that have been out of joint all day. Gretton's voice comes clipped. Adjust screen, shift column, plug the gap. The convoy pivots, slow but obedient. The wolfline feels the move and comes forward. May 5th, night. This is where the ocean remembers. The U-boats commit to the surface, sleek backs throwing water, bridge watch standing in oilskins and goggles, deck guns quiet, torpedo crews at their stations. They come at the convoy's quarters like cats after pigeons, not in one neat line, but in pulses, one after another, picking and prying and pressing the escorts to be in 2 places at once. It is supposed to be the U-boat's hour. Sunflower finds her hour first. On the edge of a column, she catches a U-boat too confident by half, a radar return that holds, and she charges without a speech. The first depth charge pattern is pure muscle memory. The second is art stitched to practice. The third is a hammer that breaks bones. Men on Sunflower feel the concussion in their teeth and know, before the oil comes up, that something has ended below. The boat is U-638. There are no survivors. The men say nothing. They mark the position and turn back to the living. Across the formation, a freighter takes a hit and goes bright. She is loaded and honest about it, fire climbing her rigging in a rush that thaws no one. Off her bow, a raft spins away. Snowflake's helm jerks. She chooses the living ship over the dying boat beneath and hauls toward screams you can't hear until you are close enough to see the whites of mouths. You feel the choice in your stomach. You live with it. Vidette, hawk-nosed and hungry, has been grinding toward one shadow all night. The operator calls ranges as if he can push sound faster by speaking. The helmsman keeps the needle where it needs to be. A hedgehog spread arcs and meets water. Seconds stretch. Then, the thuds. Not one, not two, more, hard, cold, and final. Men let out breaths they didn't know they'd saved. The boat is U-630. She will not return. Midnight is gone by the time Aribi shoulders through fog and lands in the middle of fate. Radar puts her practically on top of a shape that moves like a boat trying to look like a wave. A conning tower flashes, a turn is ordered, the sea chooses who gets what, and steel meets steel. The impact is a thunder you taste. The U-boat spins, damaged, as if the ocean has taken hold of its keel and shaken it. The escorts close. Snowflake searchlight cuts the dark. You can see the U-boat now, bent and bleeding. She cannot dive. On her deck, men move fast, then slower, then stop. Charges are set. At 03:54, scuttling smoke rises as she sags. She is U-125. The sea takes her in its usual way, quickly, without memorial. On the small hour's edge, Loosestrife fights a duel with a shape that will not go away. Radar makes a liar of fog. The U-boat tries to slip a shot at close quarters. Torpedoes miss. Loosestrife throws a shallow set pattern that lands like a closing fist. The echoes change. Oil rises. Wreckage follows. That one is U-192, hunted down and finished. Night bleeds into early May 6th. The convoy is still there, battered but together, columns scarred but aligned. Somewhere in those gray corridors between merchantmen and moonless water, a boat weighs the odds and chooses to run. Another, damaged, falls out of the pack and tries the deep. Bearings drop off. Voice traffic thins. The wolf line stutters. HF-DF, plotted and replotted, shows fewer calls and more silence. A U-boat commander who has stalked ships since 41 glances at his watch and does math he doesn't like. On an Allied bridge, a captain rubs sleep from his eyes and realizes his shoulders have unknotted. He waits for the other shoe that does not drop. 13 merchant ships will have been lost when the week's tally is finally counted. Some in a brace, some one by one, names recited in wardrooms with a pause that belongs to the dead. But the week has taken something from the hunters, too. 6 U-boats, maybe 7, depending on how you count. The scuttled and the doubly claimed, hurled into the deep in the span of nights that were supposed to be theirs. The numbers aren't just numbers. They are the moment when momentum turns. A turning point doesn't announce itself. It creeps. It gathers. Then it's there in the silence after the last detonation, when you realize the echoes are different than they were a month ago. Intelligence has been quietly moving pieces on this board. HF-DF bearings, each alone a shrug, layered and crossed over hours, made it possible to push B7 where it hurt most. The escorts weren't waiting for the blow, they were shaping it. Traffic patterns gave away the rough arc of the patrol line, and long before a periscope could see the convoy was already angling to make the ambush messy. Sensors did what courage couldn't. Centimetric radar cut into fog and night. It made periscopes visible, and confident U-boat surface approaches suddenly reckless. ASDIC told escorts not only that something was there, but where it was going. Paired together, they gave small ships the ability to hold a picture in their heads when visibility vanished. That's how Sunflower got close enough for certainty. That's how Vidette kept contact long enough to swing the hedgehog circle just right. That's how Aribi found herself nose-to-nose in a fog with U-125 and turned a radar echo into a steel collision that ended a career. Weapons married to doctrine made the hits count. Depth charges were no longer scattered in hope. They were thrown in patterns taught by blood and improved by practice. Each fall a stitch that mended the hole a U-boat wanted to crawl through. Hedgehog changed the conversation entirely. Not explosions behind a fleeing enemy, but contact fuses in front of him. Detonation only if metal was truly there. It turned guesswork into verdict. When the thuds came aboard Vidette, those sharp, sickening knocks, the crew knew they had struck steel, not seawater. Operations closed in around all of it. The idea of support groups, reinforcements that could be vectored by wireless clue rather than pure hunch, meant B7 was not an exhausted handful swinging fists in every direction. It was a hand that could grow a second hand when the fight demanded it. Even the sky, which had so long been the U-boat's ally in mid-ocean, was beginning to lean the other way. Long-range aircraft were not here in force this week, but the air gap felt narrower. It felt like a promise. In raw terms, the ledger says this: about 13 merchants gone, holds torn open, masts black against burning clouds, and 6 to 7 U-boats destroyed in the battle around ONS 5. The discrepancy is not a dodge. War counts oddly at night in fog. A boat scuttled after a ramming, a kill claimed twice against the same wreckage, a hull that slides under with just enough time for a different ship to hear the last rattle and call it hers. However the clerks resolve it, the men at sea feel what it means. What it means is this: May of 1943, the month that follows this week, will be called Black May. In that month alone, roughly 41 to 42 U-boats will be lost. About a quarter of the boats at sea, enough to slap the iron taste of reality into a strategy that had once threatened to starve a kingdom. Dunitz will pull back, to rethink, to repair, to try to rewrite the story in a theater that no longer gives him the night for free. The wolf packs will still hunt, and brave men will still die in gray water in June and July and beyond. But something fundamental shifts here. The surface ships own more of the darkness than they did before. The U-boat captains feel it in their bones. Put simply, in 1 week, a convoy that should have been prey taught the ocean a new grammar. Dawn on May 6th does not look like victory. It looks like a sky that finally remembers how to be gray instead of black. It looks like foam blown off the tops of waves and the long line of ships turning their faces west. Fires still smolder where a freighter went down in the night, and the slick that trails in her wake says oil in a language you don't need school to read. Survivors lie under blankets that don't seem to warm anything. On Snowflake's deck, a young sailor with raw hands pours tea into mugs that yearn to be coffee and finds that for a moment he can't lift his arms. The convoy evaluates itself in motion. Commodore Brook's signals tick through the columns like a pulse. Numbers are made human. This ship gone, that ship limping, this many souls saved from water that kills in minutes. The escorts write their own ledger. Sunflower marks a position with a cross that every man on board will remember by smell alone. Vedette's coxswain talks about the way the thuds felt through his boots when the hedgehog found its mark, and he doesn't talk long. Oribe's forward plates are dented in a way that looks almost like pride. Lucistrife's crew cleans oil from decks and says little about the moment the echoes changed. On the U-boats that lived, men count blessings they don't believe in. A chief who has listened to bulkheads sing for 3 years tells a junior to go topside and check the weather, and says it, not because it needs doing, but because he wants that boy to breathe air that has not been inside a ship. A captain folds the message that calls them off and sets it down like a glass that might spill. They will live for now. The ocean is an honest accountant. It will reconcile later. What the week means, right now, is a convoy that keeps moving. It means cargo that will land and become meals and bullets and the thread in a uniform. It means lessons written in the dark that all the ships will carry forward. Charge first, coordinate, trust your ears, trust the math, and when the choice is between finishing a kill and saving a crew, learn to make that choice fast and live with it slow. There is a burial at sea for a man who did not come back from a rescue. The service is short. It would be short even if the ocean were a chapel, because grief is a duty, and so is the watch. The body slides on a board and tips into water that receives him with the same indifference with which it receives oil, and cargo, and ships, and men who command them. Someone says a word no one will pretend to remember. Someone else looks at the horizon like he's memorizing it in case it goes somewhere without him. When the week is told later, it will gather anchors, names and hull numbers, dates and positions. The way Sunflower killed U-638 and how Vedette ended U-630. How Oribe's ram crippled U-125 before Snowflake's lights found her. How Lucistrife finished U-192. It will carry its loss count like a scar, about 13 merchants, and wear its counterpunch like proof. 6, maybe 7 U-boats sunk, depending on who you ask and how you measure the last minutes of a dying boat. It will sit in histories as a turning point, not because someone decided it should be, but because the seas afterwards sounded different on sonar, and because U-boat captains found fewer nights where the ocean belonged to them. The men who lived it will remember other things. The way wet wool hangs heavy on shoulders when you're already tired. The way coffee goes to mud at 3 a.m. The way a signal lamp can feel like a human voice when you haven't heard one for hours. They will remember that a convoy is a promise. They kept it. By the time the air gap truly shrinks and patrols can ride the mid-ocean regularly, this week will already have done its work. The idea that the U-boat owns the night will be a story you tell to prove how fast stories can die. The ocean flattens a little as the wind crosses downscale. The horizon turns the color of a good steel blade put away clean. Somewhere beyond it, land. Somewhere behind it, wrecks that will not be raised. Somewhere between, ships that did their work and men who did theirs. This video's content is compiled from multiple sources. If anything needs correction, please comment below. See you next time.